It's one of the most controversial courtroom dramas in American history. Donald Trump has now become the first former American president to be convicted on felony crimes. In his case, all 34 charges. The hush money trial actually dates back to before Donald Trump became president in 2016. Prosecutors have accused Donald Trump of falsifying internal business records to cover up the hush money payments. These payments were tied to an alleged scheme to bury stories about Trump and adult movie star Stormy Daniels before his 2016 White House bid. About $130,000 was allegedly paid to Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, to adult movie star Stormy in exchange for not going public with her claim of a 2006 sexual encounter with Donald Trump. Now, prosecutors said the reimbursements were falsely logged as legal expenses to hide the true nature of the transaction, charges that the former president has denied. Now, the conviction of Trump, however, remember, is just the latest step in his legal battle in the New York court system. Judge Juan Merchan has set Trump's sentencing for the 11th of July. Trump has been convicted of Class E felonies, which is New York's lowest level, wherein he could either be sentenced to 4 years behind bars or to probation. Now, even as Trump rejected the charges, the conviction has divided Americans. His supporters say that this is the Democratic Party's strategy to beat Trump in the courtroom rather than the ballot box. Those against him say the conviction was long due. But let's get an understanding of how this really moves forward now, both legally as well as politically. On the broadcast, I'm joined by Karthikeya Tanna. He's an author and columnist and a U.S. immigration lawyer. I'm also joined by Spencer Critchley, political analyst and author of Patriots of Two Nations, Why Trump Was Inevitable and What Happens Next. Good evening, namaskar, welcome both of you. Spencer, before I ask you what happens next, let me understand from Karthikeya on what happens next legally for Donald Trump. Karthikeya, this has come as a historic judgment against a former US president, the first in American history. But help us understand what happens legally now, especially in an election year in the United States. Can he still campaign? How does this case really move forward in the courts now?
Well, I mean, there's no restriction on him to campaign as long as he's obviously not arrested. And the sentencing is scheduled for July 11, which, ironically is 4 days before the Republican convention. So if he is not on any kind of curtailment, if he goes away with a fine, then he's free to campaign, of course. He's also free to contest. There's no bar on him insofar as this conviction is concerned with regard to contesting the presidential election. Now, whether that affects him politically, electorally or not, that remains to be seen. What the voters decide, whether they want to vote for a convict or not. In terms of legal remedies, he's just going to wait for, I believe he's just going to wait for the sentencing decision, which is on July 11, and then perhaps take his next steps, legally speaking.
Karthikeya, what's the likelihood in this case of what the verdict, what the sentencing, the quantum of sentence would be? 4 years is, something that's the maximum punishment in this case. What's the likelihood of that quantum of sentence?
Oh, I mean, again, this is speculation right now. I mean, the way the trial has gone so far, the bond that was placed on him, the ridiculous amount of the bond that was placed on him, and also just the way this has happened, and there's even issues in the sense that the judge's daughter has been raising funds, on Democrat issues or from the Democrats while this case is going on. So there's a lot of issues that are not above water in this judgment. So I would be surprised if he gets away with just a fine. There probably would be either house arrest or maybe a very light prison term. But that's, again, speculation. I mean, we don't know. No one knows at this point of time.
Okay. Spencer, this verdict has, of course, divided Americans. Those who support Donald Trump say that this is a Democratic strategy ahead of the November elections to sort of, distract Donald Trump and stop him from running the election. The others say that this was long due, this had to happen, and this is something that Donald Trump should have been convicted of much earlier. How do you see this really panning out?
I think this
that
is
a question
part of. I'm sorry, is that for me?
Spencer, go ahead. This is for you. Yes.
I think this is actually part of an ongoing crisis in not just American democracy, but democracy around the world that predates Trump. It's been developing for decades, and I get into the history of this in the United States in my book. Really, when people talk about two sides to this issue, we're not talking about two sides within the same worldview. We're really talking about conflicts between fundamentally different worldviews, people living in effect, different realities. So in the MAGA reality of Donald Trump, he's much more like a medieval king than an elected official in a democracy. And so people, in effect, swear loyalty to him. And when he uses language, it tends to be symbolic, and almost magical sometimes, or it takes on religious overtones. And so he can't be held to standards of evidence and logic the way people who live in the sort of liberal democracy worldview would expect. And so we're going to see this continue no matter what happens in the future, whether Trump is elected or defeated. He and his most devoted followers will continue to believe what he tells them, the same way they would believe a king, as I say, or a religious leader who tells them things. They believe him just because he tells them. The evidence that's lacking is irrelevant in this case.
Spencer, it's interesting that you call Donald Trump a medieval king.
Pardon me?
Because a lot of people also say that these are frivolous charges, and these are charges and these are situations that happened in the past, and why bring them up right now? Karthika, you want to respond to what Spencer is saying, the fact that he's a medieval king, Donald Trump, and, his supporters would believe just about anything that he says.
I mean, again, what Spencer says could well be true, but the fact is that Donald Trump is quite popular in his fan base, and quite honestly, this whole trial, the way it has been going, the way it has proceeded, and the judgment has probably added some more followers in that mentality. Who, let's assume, if they treat him as a medieval king, it's just only added more followers, and I don't understand the political strategy behind this. Why unnecessarily victimize Trump? Because obviously that is the message that's coming across to all of his supporters. And even those on the fence might be thinking that, okay, maybe this is a crime. Maybe it is a wrongdoing. But how is it so serious, and how is it so well timed that everything is just falling into, into its own natural path right in the middle of fierce campaign battle? So I don't understand the strategy behind this that's going on.
All right, I'll come back to both of you. Let's just listen in to what Trump's reaction was after this verdict.
A case where if they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone. So I'm the leading person for president, and I'm under a gag order by a man that can't put two sentences together. But the judge allowed them to go into everything that I was ever involved in. As far as the trial itself, it was very unfair. We weren't allowed to use our election expert under any circumstances. You saw what happened to some of the witnesses that were on our side. They were literally crucified by this man who looks like an angel, but he's really a devil. He looks so nice and soft. People say, oh, he seems like such a nice man. No, unless you saw him in action. And you saw that with a certain witness that went through hell. And when we wanted to do things, he wouldn't let us do those things. But when the government wanted something, they got everything. They got everything they wanted. It was a rigged trial. We wanted a venue change where we could have a fair trial. We didn't get it. We wanted a judge change. We wanted a judge that wasn't conflicted. And obviously he didn't do that. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Say, falsifying business, that's a bad thing for me. I've never had that before.
So that was Donald Trump, of course, speaking after the verdict came in. Spencer, one of the allegations against the Biden government is that throughout this trial, the Biden administration has been fairly silent. They haven't been really reacting on whatever is happening in this trial. But many also say that because Biden's ratings and popularity is going down in opinion polls, which is why, and it is one of the reasons why this is happening right now. Do you agree with that?
No, not at all. And this is an example of the two worldviews, I say, where there's essentially no common ground to be found between these two worldviews. There is no political strategy behind this prosecution because in a liberal democracy like America's, there is a strict separation between the judicial branch and the legislative branch of the federal government. Furthermore, this was a state prosecution, which is another layer of separation. Furthermore, Alvin Bragg, the DA who brought this prosecution, initially refused to bring it because he didn't think there was a strong enough case. Now, in order to demonstrate that somehow the Biden administration was behind all this, you'd need to produce some evidence of that, which no one has ever been able to do. But as I say, in the sort of pre-modern, pre-Enlightenment feudal worldview of MAGA, it doesn't matter. Trump also makes my point almost too perfectly in the clip you just played. Notice that all his language is symbolic. On a factual and logical basis, he told one flagrant lie after another. None of those things was true, and they're demonstrably untrue. If you'll find that if you just check the evidence. It was explained carefully to him that he was allowed to testify. All of this other stuff, they're just lies, but that doesn't matter. Notice that his language involves things like
But Spencer,
claiming that
do you want to
somebody was
answer
literally
to what Karthikeyan
crucified.
said, that, why now?
Pardon me.
Absolutely. All your points taken. But the fact of the matter is, Spencer, why now? Why in an election year? Why just months away from the November US presidential elections?
Well,
why is this happening, all of this trial and this verdict now?
Because this is how long it took to bring the case. You'll notice that with the other cases against former President Trump, there have been long delays to the point where it's now entirely likely that those cases will happen after the November election. So one could claim that there's a conspiracy involved there as well. But to prove a conspiracy, you need to produce some evidence. And so I'm not going to make claims like that without evidence. As I say, Alvin Bragg, who brought this case we're talking about now, initially refused to go forward with it. He didn't think the case was strong enough. I was about to say, when Trump says someone was literally crucified, think about that. To be literally crucified, that would mean that person was literally nailed to a cross, which obviously did not happen. He's speaking symbolically. When he describes Judge Merchan as somebody who looks like an angel but is actually a devil, again, we're in the sort of pre-Enlightenment, pre-scientific reason world of feudalism where magic and demonic forces still rule the world.
But Spencer, interestingly, there are cases, there are allegations against Joe Biden as well as his son Hunter, but there seems to be no traction on that. There seems to be nobody doing anything on those cases.
On the contrary, President Biden allowed the continuation, as he certainly should have, of the special counsel who was appointed under President Trump, and he has cooperated fully in all of those investigations, just like he cooperated fully, unlike President Trump, when it was discovered that he had taken some classified documents, apparently inadvertently, from the White House when he left his job as vice president previously. So no, he has allowed aggressive investigation of the Hunter Biden case to proceed, as he certainly should have. And he has allowed any investigations into his own conduct to proceed. And if they're, including by people who are clearly not fans of his necessarily, not obvious supporters of his because they were appointed by the previous president or they're known to vote Republican or whatever. But we should trust that in the absence of evidence that those people are behaving professionally. And I think President Biden has been behaving the way the leader of a liberal democracy should behave, which is to recognize the rule of law.
Okay, let me get in Karthikeyan on this, Spencer, and I have to wrap this up then. Karthikeyan, 30 seconds. How do you see this moving forward? Do you resonate with what Spencer is saying? and about the November presidential elections. Do you see Donald Trump really winning that eventually after all of this, gets over?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you, Karthikeya.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, Karthikeya, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, what I was saying is there's a lot of time between now and November. A lot of things can happen. It depends on what his sentencing is.
Sure.
It depends on, a lot of other factors, including I would even say the GOP's decision whether to, consider him as the front runner or not. So there's a lot of twists that I believe could very well be possible. But in regard to what Spencer was saying, I have to say that Alvin Bragg's, yes, I mean, he initially did all the pretense of, not bringing this case, but he actually ran his campaign as the DA on this very ground that he wants to nail Trump. So let's not forget that. I mean, this is a clear political witch hunt.
That's not actually
now,
what the record shows.
That is actually what the record shows, Spencer. Alvin actually ran his campaign on that.
He did not run his campaign. He did not run his campaign on going after Trump.
I mean, that was one of his central points in the campaign. But let's agree to disagree there. The fact is that perception-wise, this is how it's going to go down in an election year. I mean, yes, Spencer is right that Trump often lies, and yes, I mean, some of his things are not factually grounded. But the point is, what do the voters believe? And with this trial against him and the way it's gone, it's only going to help Trump. I don't understand the strategy, if at all anyone is behind that.
Okay.
There is no strategy. We just try to follow the law.
Okay, we'll have to see how it really moves forward. Okay, we'll have to see how it really moves forward with both Donald Trump as well as Joe Biden. I'll wrap it up here. Karthikeya Tanna and Spencer Critchley, thank you very much to both of you gentlemen for joining us on Nation Tonight and sharing your perspectives. Thank you very much. With that, we're slipping into a short break. News and updates will continue on the other side. Stay tuned to Mirror Now.